Hello and welcome back to another doujinshi review from White Album 2. Now today we're going to be looking at another art comic style doujinshi by Malibu Pain. So, jumping right into this, as you can see, we have a lovely cover of Setsuna. And again, the art style is almost chibi-like in the proportions here, which means the characters have really big heads, really smaller bodies, smaller hands, and that's just kind of the art style of this author/artist. You can see down here, this is rated 18, but that's only for the beginning part of the doujin, so we can take a look at most of it here. Now, the title of this is Marijuana and Morphene. So kind of an intense title for a White Album 2 doujin, but with good reason, and we will explain why later on. So, opening up here, we have nothing. But opening up one more page, we have a really nice image of Setsuna, and she's here in black and white. The shading is nice and simple on this one. She's got tears in her eyes, as is common in White Album 2 games. Now, this part, unfortunately, makes me a little upset because it's basically a not safe for work warning, which is fine, totally fair. We have the not safe for work warning here. But instead of just saying this work is not safe for work, it is explicit, it says this work contains the ugly parts of a woman, which is not cool. Like, I love White Album 2. I try not to be too judgmental, but that's an extremely rude thing to write. I suppose they don't expect many women to be enjoying this. Japanese society is still a little bit behind as far as progressiveness goes. But yeah, they specifically use the word ugly, so don't love that. I do not love that. But we will go ahead and skip over the parts which they are talking about. It's only a few pages in the beginning. The rest is safe for work, and it contains a lot of story, which I do love. So, after Haruki and Setsuna have a nice night together, a very intimate night together, they're both kind of struggling with their feelings toward each other. They haven't quite connected emotionally enough. And so they're both just kind of hesitant. And Setsuna says, I need some time to myself. I want to think. I need to think things over. Because she knows Haruki is not 100% dedicated to her at this point. So at this point, she's like, well, I still love Haruki. Like, it's obvious. She still has feelings for him. She still wants to be with him, but she doesn't know if that's the right decision at this point for her or for Haruki. So she's kind of having her own struggles with that. Haruki eventually texts her a few weeks later, and they decide to meet up at the park. So they meet up at the park, and Setsuna immediately apologizes. I'm so sorry for hurting you. I'm so sorry for not contacting you all this time. We still want to be together kind of thing. So it's painful. And it's painful that most of these decisions are on Setsuna at this point. She's like, can I put my own pain aside? Can I accept Haruki as he is, as never being able to fully dedicate himself to me? That's a tough decision to have to make. But it's an emotional reunion. They both end up agreeing that they do want to be together, and they want to support Kazusa. So it's kind of a sweet thing. Haruki's pretty much just begging Setsuna for help, like, please, let's do what we can for her, because he still wants to have them both in his life, but he'll dedicate himself to Setsuna in this instance. So Setsuna decides the best way to do that is to work for the music production company and work with Kazusa, essentially, along with Haruki. So the three end up being back together in their own way. Although Kazusa is kind of shocked at this turn of events. And then we have Tomo, and they end up going out for breakfast together. It wasn't supposed to be breakfast, it was supposed to just be drinks, but of course, Tomo being Tomo orders a gigantic thing of fancy pancakes. And is just really, her role in White Album is to be the blunt friend. And so she's questioning Setsuna, like, what do you want, though? Like, putting aside everyone else's feelings, what do you want? And it's important to have a character that asks something like that. She's not trying to get what's best for Haruki. She doesn't care. She doesn't care about Kazusa. She cares about Setsuna and Setsuna's feelings. So she is an important character, even though she's very frustrating and annoying. So she really talks some sense into Setsuna, but in the end, we do know that Setsuna loves Haruki and wants to do what's best for him and Kazusa, because she does love Kazusa in her own friendship way. So they end up back to back sleeping. Of course, neither of them can sleep because they're so anxious, and almost immediately they start fighting. And Setsuna's talking about, I gave you Haruki's first time. Wasn't that enough? Wasn't that enough for you? And she's getting so angry so fast. And then they both just start screaming at each other. And it's not a pretty sight. And, Kazusa's point is always going to be, well, you have him now. You have him in a much more serious way than I ever did. And Setsuna's like, well, I don't have him fully. He's always going to love you. And so they're both trying to come to terms with that, because it's not the other girl's fault. They both know that, honestly, it's kind of Haruki's fault, but they view each other as enemies for that reason. So it's really sad. But Kazusa's pretty much just asking Setsuna to protect Haruki and to do their best, because the two of them are good for each other. So they have a little heartfelt, heart-to-heart moment, and it's really sweet and really sad, as usual. And then the next day, Haruki comes back and doesn't have to deal with the emotional fallout of it. So that's kind of how it ended up wrapping up there. They just go back to work together. Kazusa tells Haruki, I'll always love you. They're never going to get over that. And she's pretty blunt about it here. She's like, you're the only man for me. I'm never going to find another man, but I'm not going to be with you. I want you to be with Setsuna. So kind of following along with the game's endings, at least one of the game ending there. And Haruki's super sad about it, but thinking the situation is probably for the best, he goes and meets with Setsuna and just kind of asks her to be his, really, coming fully dedicated to her, I guess you could say. And then following that up, we have their marriage picture here. And then that is the end. So we have the thank you here from the artist. And the reason, they do write actually the reason for the title. So this was marijuana and morphine. Now, it requires a little bit of context because marijuana is still very, very, very illegal in Japan. It is very frowned upon. It's not the kind of half illegal thing like in the US or other countries. It's still viewed as bad as any other drug would be. And so what the artist is saying here is that Kazusa is like marijuana, super addictive and super bad. And on the contrary, Setsuna is like morphine, which can relieve pain. So you gotta keep in mind how Japan views marijuana to kind of understand that title in full. But they are saying thank you so much for reading the book, as usual. This was released in 2019. You can see Malibu Pain's Twitter, also Pixiv account, where they post a lot of straight up art rather than full novels. And then on the back side, their logo and White Album 2 fan book. So definitely an interesting read. I do recommend it just because the story writing of Malibu Pain is very good. So thank you so much for joining me on this doujinshi review today, and I will be reviewing more White Album 2 doujins in the future. So I hope to see you there, and until then, take care.